Hello, friends. Today's talk is on the Americas. The United Lodge of Theosophists for the Washington, D.C. area is currently closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. We will present scheduled talks online to the extent we can. And in the meantime, please visit our website at www.ultdc.org or phone us at 301-656-3566 for more information. We follow the ULT Declaration in our efforts to make available the original teachings of the ancient wisdom and the path to perfection as recorded and named Theosophy by H.P. Blavatsky. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. It starting here on chapter 15, Devotion through Knowledge of the Supreme Spirit. Krishna is speaking. Men say that the Ashwatha, the eternal sacred tree, grows with its roots above and its branches below, and the leaves of which are the Vedas. He who knows this knows the Vedas. Its branches growing out of the three qualities, with the objects of sense as the lesser shoots, spread forth, some above and some below, and those roots which ramify below in the regions of mankind are the connecting bonds of action. Its form is not thus understood by men. It has no beginning, nor can its present constitution be understood, nor has it any end. When one hath hewn down with the strong axe of dispassion the Ashwatha tree with its deeply embedded roots, then that place is to be sought after, from which those who there take refuge nevermore return to rebirth. For it is the primeval spirit from which floweth the never-ending stream of conditioned existence. Those who are free from pride of self and whose discrimination is perfected, who have prevailed over the fault of attachment to action, who are constantly employed in devotion to meditation upon the Supreme Spirit, who have renounced desire, and who are free from the influence of the opposites known as pleasure and pain, are undiluted and proceed to that place which endureth forever. Neither the sun nor the moon nor the fire enlighteneth that place. From it there is no return. It is my supreme abode. And now for today's talk on the Americas.
Good afternoon and welcome, friends. Today's talk is on the Americas, and the question comes up as to why we should talk about the Americas. Well, when you look at the civilizations of the world, we can just about tell how they came about. But America was discovered by Christopher Columbus in the 15th century, and we really don't concern ourselves too much as to what its history is prior to it. And if we need to understand where all those races came from, then we need to go to Atlantis, which is the fourth race discussed in the Secret Doctrine. And I wanted to give you an estimate of the length of time that it required for that nation to become what it was. In order to understand how the Atlantean race spread around, we need to understand what time period was spent. On page 710 of Secret Doctrine 2, this statement is made. Such estimates as stated above harmonize with the statements of the esoteric ethnology in almost every particular. The tertiary Atlantean part cycle from the apex of glory of that race in the early Eocene to the great mid-Miocene cataclysm would appear to have lasted some 3.5 to 4 million years. If the duration of the Quaternary is not rather overestimated, the sinking of Ruta and Daitya would be post-tertiary. We're talking about tertiary, which is Eocene, Miocene, and Paleocene. It is probable that the results here given allow somewhat too long a period to the tertiary and quaternary, because, as stated, the third race goes very far back into the secondary age, and the time period or approximate years estimated for these periods are given on the right side. The secondary involves 36,800,000 years. The tertiary is 7,360,000 years, and the quaternary is 1,600,000 years. And we will post this page so that you can look at it. So then, from the apex of glory, which is the Eocene, to the mid-cycle of Miocene, it says that it took 3.5 to 4 million years. But the Atlantean island that sank, according to Plato's statement, took or was 11,000 years ago, according to our historical era. So it just shows that old races and the younger ones coexist for a very long time until that coexistence produces a new root race, while this amalgamation or distribution and then separation takes place. When we go to the civilizations of Persia, China, and Egypt, and their roots in the remote past of the fourth Atlantean race, we can trace it. But what about the American Indian? What's their root? Where did they come from? Whoever associates American civilization with such an ancient source, as stated, that American history normally begins with Columbus's discovery of the New World. Yet the New World is much older than Europe. The continent, having risen from the ocean bed during the palmy days of Atlantis, which sank, as we just said, millions of years ago. Does it seem probable that nature would allow such a land as the Americas to remain without its humanity, is the question. So how do we consider this today? First of all, we need to apply the principle of continuity. Nature's processes are never broken. Constant change of land masses as well as races is always in progress. This transforming process culminates at certain periods in the breaking asunder of land surfaces, on which reincarnate and develop races gradually adapted to the modified new conditions of the land that is left or rises out of the sea. So then, wherever separated land areas or divergent races appear, we must look for the hidden connections and the intervening types which once bound them together in one continuous line of evolution, the whole process preparing for higher races and at last for perfected man to appear on the scene. There was a skeleton recovered in New Orleans, and its age was considered to be over 50,000 years. On the other hand, some scientists accept the existence of continents of Lemuria and Atlantis, and that there was a connection between America and Atlantis is very obvious. So then, if such connections existed, why would we not assume migrations from those older continents to come to the Americas? In fact, the Mayas of Central America, Toltecs, and other tribes maintain that their ancestors came from the East. For generations, according to Spence, Antilles or West India Islands were recognized as being the remains of an island continent called Antilia. And this is shown on a globe by Beheim in 1492. This same writer also says that in a letter to Columbus in 1474, Toscanelli refers to Antilia. Also, that long after the South American coast had been explored and demonstrated as a continental area, it was definitely identified with Antilia, as two maps in the Egerton manuscript, now in the British Museum, distinctly prove. But Antilia was very evidently only a disconnected portion of a much larger region as indicated by deep sea soundings in the Atlantic basin. And we will put that at the end of the talk as well. These have revealed the presence of an elevated ridge which is 9,000 feet higher than the ocean floor, beginning near the coast of Ireland, extending through the Azores in a southwesterly way to the vicinity of the Amazon River in South America, and then shifting almost at right angles and proceeding towards southeast to the African coast and down to Tristan da Cunha, which, as you know, is almost to the Cape Horn or Africa and the tip end of South America. So the other indications for a former connection between the New World and the Old are similar geological structure of the opposing coastlines of South America and Africa, and either an identity or close resemblance between the fauna and flora of the United States and Europe. In the forests of Virginia and Florida are many varieties of corresponding trees with the European flora of the tertiary age, term for term. How did they reach the New World if there was no communication? That the transition was not by way of the isthmus that once filled up Bering Strait is proved by the fact that a great number of these are not found west of the Rocky Mountains. And if you go to the United States map, you can see that the Rocky Mountains compose northern part of New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, and then goes into Canada. The stones in the Canary Islands, which is a remnant of Atlantis, bear sculptured symbols similar to those found on the shore of Lake Superior. The form of a skull belonging to the Guanches of the Canary Islands is the same as that of the Caribs of the West Indies, the Mayas and other tribes, which leads us to postulate the unity of race of the early men of these islands and America. And you can also go to Secret Doctrine 2, page 789, for further reading and proof. So then, basing these ideas on such facts as these, and also on Plato's story of Atlantis, the name given to him, to that last island, which was, as said, engulfed into the Atlantic Ocean 11,000 years ago, many reconstructions of the lost continent have been mapped in recent days, but these give only an approximate idea of the size and shape, confined as they are to a small area of the Atlantic. Although the origin and the development of the fourth race was about the midpoint of the present ocean, the continent extended from coast of the Venezuela across to North Africa, and from Newfoundland nearly to the coast of France. Going still further back, how long, who can say, when a tropical climate prevailed in the Arctic region, one could cross almost by dry land from Norway via Iceland and Greenland to the lands now surrounding Hudson's Bay. This may account for the similarity between the artificial mounds found in the United States and the tumuli of Norway, which have led some of the archaeologists to suggest that they were the work of Norwegian mariners who discovered America 1,000 years ago under the leadership of Leif Erikson. But according to this philosophy, that is only a rediscovery because the age of the mounds or the tumuli are not known. But why did a Greek philosopher 400 BC give the name Atlantis to the lost continent? It is not a Greek word, nor can it be referred to any known language of the Old World. The root of the word is found, however, in the Mexican tongue. It is spelled Nahuatl, Atil, ATL, signifying, among other things, water. From this comes a series of words, one of which is Atlan, a name of a town in Darien in existence when Columbus discovered America. It is not very extraordinary to have found in Aboriginal America a town called by a name which contains a purely local element, foreign to every other country and allegedly to the fiction of Plato. But not until recently his story was considered a mere myth, considering the Atlantean island sinking into the Atlantic Ocean. The same may be said of the name America, says HPB, which may one day be found more closely related to Meru, the sacred mount in the center of the 7 continents, than to the name Amerigo Vespucci. And the Professor Wilder thinks that Vespucci would have been more likely to be used if he was to give a title to that country. He would have used his surname, not his first name. So, when America was discovered, some of the native tribes called it Atlanta. On the basis of an Atlantis connection alone, how are we to find similarities to the Chinese language among some American tribes or between the Cyclopean structures of the Tiwanaku, which is also called Tiahuanaco, and Easter Island? A Chinese writer referred to America, says HPB, when speaking of that far distant land into which pious men and heavy storms had transferred the sacred doctrine. And she adds that the sacred doctrine of the land, which was the cradle of physical men of the 5th race, had found its way into the so-called New World ages and ages before the sacred doctrine of Buddhism. But no doctrine is taken to any land without inhabitants. Who are these men whose fossil remains have never been exhumed, or if they have been, these bone structures, skeletons, are considered comparatively recent. However, De la Vega, a native historian of Inca blood, states that masses of enormous human bones were found in America near Mizort, where the spot is, which tradition points out as the landing of those giants who overran America when it had hardly risen from the waters. The natives also believe that the massive buildings in Tiwanaku were erected by giants. But there was, according to the secret doctrine, a Western connection with India. Now, we have to remember that the prehistoric India stretched into the Gobi Desert and included Mongolia, where the yellow race was developed. Hence, it was that a pedestrian going north might have reached hardly wetting his feet, the Alaskan Peninsula through Manchuria, across the Gulf of Tartary, the Kuril, and the Aleutian Islands, while another traveler with a canoe and starting from the south could have walked over from Siam, crossed the Polynesian Islands, and trudged into any part of South America. Siam then is Thailand today. And we also know that Lemuria lay in the Antarctic region, and the remaining portions of that land might have been adjacent to the southernmost part of South America. A connection between India and America was always assumed. When Columbus set out on his voyage of discovery, he was looking for a western route to India. And until the appearance of a map in Basel in 1522, wherein the name of America appeared on that map for the first time, the latter was supposed to be part of India. Why were the islands reached by Columbus called the West Indies? How did the Aborigines of America come by that name, Indians? Or was there some natural cause for that application of old name India? Could it be that just as the pioneers today bring with them the names of localities from which they came, or speak of themselves as French or Germans, although on American soil? So then an identity is found in the names of certain medicine men and priests who exist to this day in Mexico and East Indians. In Hindu works, America is referred to as Patala, meaning the antipodes, and Arjuna, Krishna's disciple, is said to have descended to Patala and married a daughter of one of the Nagas, or serpents of wisdom. That must have been 5,000 years ago at least. There's a very curious statement in the Circuit of Doctrine, Volume 2, on page 132, about the race of Nagas, 1,000 in number only, born or rather sprung from Kasyapa's wife for the peopling of this country. Was there then a time when wise men dwelt in America, and were these men red Indians? We remember that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of 4 castes: the Brahmans, teachers, the Kshatriyas, warriors, the merchants, and the servitors. So we're talking about here white, red, yellow, and brown, black races. So the colors of these different races might be suggestive in this connection. The occult philosophy does not accept the biblical division of the races as being descended from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But at the same time, it recognizes 3 entirely distinct primeval races whose evolution, formation, and development followed parallel lines with the evolution, formation, and development of the 3 geological strata, namely black, red, yellow, and brown, white. Man was universally considered in antiquity as born of the earth, for human complexion was as much derived from the earth as it was determined by climate. The light yellow was the color of the first solid race, the later third. The third gave birth to the fourth, and this black part of that race formed that portion of humanity that gradually transformed itself into red-yellow, of whom the red Indians and the Mongolians are descendants. And of course, finally into brown-white, the color of the fifth Aryan race. Secret Doctrine, page 250, 424 to 425. So Arjuna and the race of Nagas must have been an Aryan infusion among a people which in course of time became a distinct type, fourth race Americans, now known by Red Indians. A master wrote, and this you can also find in the Secret Doctrine 2, towards the end, where anthropogenesis is discussed, that there were brown, red, yellow, white, and black Atlanteans, giants, and dwarfs. For the term Atlantean covers an almost countless number of races and nations. And if you go to Donnelly's book, he says that in later ages, so desirous were the Egyptians of preserving their aristocratic distinction of color of their skin that they represented this on their monuments as a crimson hue. In this nation, as in others, were many peoples of different colors. So it is natural that in the dispersion of races from Atlantis, both before and as the continent was visited by cataclysmic disturbances and shows sign of sinking, some went east, locating on the shores of the Mediterranean and penetrating into the more remote regions of Asia, and some came west, and thus the same varieties of color obtained and still persisting. We can now understand how it was that the Spaniards in the Cibola expeditions met with white savage chiefs. The name White Indians was given to the Menominees. Once around Lake Michigan, many of the Zunis are almost white with blue eyes and auburn hair. The Mandans are almost white, while their neighbors, the Crows, are very dark. The Dakotas are a shade lighter than olive. The Toltecs in Mexico resemble the Jews, and according to a native writer, they are their descendants. The ancient Peruvians appear from hair found in their tombs to have been an auburn-haired race. Ferdinand Columbus, in the account of his father's voyage, compares the inhabitants of Guanani to the Canary Islanders and describes the people of San Domingo as still more beautiful and fair. Donnelly concluded that there was no doubt but that red, white, black, and yellow men had united to form the original population of America, and said, quote, "When science is able to disabuse itself of the theory that the aborigines of America are all red men and all belong to one race, we may hope that the confluence upon the continent of widely different races from different countries may come to be recognized and intelligently studied." Many recent authorities, unfortunately, still contend that there is but one general type of American Indian. We have to remember what Mr. Judge states in The Ocean of Theosophy, that by the method of mixture, precipitation, and separation, nature brings about the greatest perfection. The remotest ancestors of some of the inhabitants of now the area called Aklo, the former Atlan, were allied at one time as closely with the old Greeks and Romans as they were with the true inland Chinamen. Greeks as well as Egyptians and Phoenicians trace back to the last subrace of Atlantis. Many tribes emigrated to lands which in course of time owing to new geological conventions, became islands. Being thus forcibly separated from larger centers of civilization, they gradually degenerated and fell into a savage condition. Secret Doctrine 2, 743 to 745. So when we look at the history of the Red Indians, we feel sadness for them and also the tremendous weight of karma on the white races. Upon first meeting, the Indians were friendly and unsuspicious, and it was chiefly on account of the white man's treachery, plunder, and cruelty that their original attitude was changed to distrust and hatred. Preserving in their legends and holding many beliefs closer to fact than those current among their conquerors, observing many customs and ceremonies truer to nature than those of the people to whom they became subject, forced to adopt ideas which in their hearts they rejected, they have watched the gradual encroachment upon their territory and abolition of their rights with resentment. Not so very many years ago, the Indians appealed to the white father of the United States in Washington for the possession of 4 small lakes, and their petition was written on a tiny surface of fabric. Barely a dozen representations of animals and birds covered their request. This ideographic writing is the earliest mode of recording events and ideas, and how old this is may be inferred from some signs found on hatchets of the Paleolithic period, which began hundreds of thousands of years ago. So the American savages have a number of such kinds of writing. As the chief element in the languages of the 5th race is the Aryan Sanskrit of the brown-white geological stock, so the predominating element in Atlantis was a language which was now survived but in dialects of some American Red Indian tribes and the Chinese speech of the inland Chinamen, a language which was a mixture of the agglutinative and the monosyllabic, referred to 5 years of Theosophy. All of those who have regarded the ideographs of the Red Indians and even the Chinese characters as attempts of the early races to express their untutored thoughts will be loath to accept the statement that writing was invented by the Atlanteans and not by the Phoenicians. So as the 4th race overlapped the 3rd, so the presence side by side of the Indians and the white men is witness to the overlapping of the 5th and the 4th. Already there are indications that many red men have reincarnated among the white races to receive and work out their karmic relations. And not all of these ties are based on hate. There are many bonds of love and friendship that were cemented between the two peoples at that time. So then, pure Anglo-Saxons, hardly 300 years ago, the Americans of the United States have already become a nation apart, and owing to a strong mixture of various nationalities and intermarriage, almost a race sui generis. Mentally and physically, they are the germs of the 6th subrace, which is now forming here, and in which in some few hundred years more will become most decidedly the pioneers of that race, which must succeed to the present European or the 5th subrace. In about 25,000 years, they will launch into preparation for the 7th subrace, after which the 6th root race will have appeared on the stage all around. When is this going to take place? Who knows? because masters of wisdom are silent on this subject as the snow-capped peaks that tower above them. But we know that silently and slowly it will come about. And we have to think that it is the mankind of the new world whose mission and karma it is to sow the seeds for a forthcoming, grander and far more glorious race than any we know at present. And who will compose this race, do we think? Well, who else but ourselves? Reincarnated, red, yellow, black, brown, and white men of all climes and ages.